Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. It is January 9th, and right now we are looking at the infrared satellite imagery here, and you can see that storm system low pressure is right about here, moving through southern BC as we speak. It is going to tighten a very strong pressure gradient as we go through the day today. I know it's been windy last night, but that's going to continue on in through the day today, including some of the Seattle Metro, down the Strait of Juan de Fuca, across the higher terrain. Some ongoing very strong winds through the day today. That's why the blizzard warnings are in effect. You can see this very cold air moving in with this system. And then we're going to take a look at this weekend because we have a very dynamic situation unfolding. We're going to have some Arctic air west of the mountain ranges here, and we're going to have a Pacific system move into that Arctic air. Somebody is bound to get a nice snowfall out of this, could have some high impacts, and we'll dive into those details. We go through the video here this morning, taking a look at the wave action here. There's going to be some big waves down the Strait of Juan de Fuca today towards Whidbey Island as well, and you can really see along the coastline. Heads up for that activity. If you were out there, should be some nice wave watching if you can find a nice spot. Here's the current winds. You can see how things are turning a bit more southwesterly and westerly as the low pressure center moves through southern British Columbia here, and that's really going to keep these winds ripping across the higher terrain. Do not be traveling out there if you can avoid it across the passes today. I'd be surprised if the passes are not closed for much of the time today and on in through tomorrow as well. And take a look at that blizzard warning. Goes all the way in through tomorrow morning. You can see it encompasses all the Washington Cascades. This is for some of the Oregon Cascades, the Blue Mountains as well, and the Olympic Mountains. And you can see just exactly what a blizzard is. You need blowing or falling snow to restrict visibility, quarter mile or less here for at least 3 hours, and you have to have 35-mile-per-hour winds for that 3-hour period also. And this is some coastal flood hazards. We got some high tides kind of correlating with some of this wind activity as bring that westerly surge, especially across Whidbey Island and all the way up and down the Puget Sound as well. You can see 1 to 3 feet of inundation possible. Don't drive on the flooded roadways out there. High tide for Whidbey Island is right around 2 p.m. I'm going to go out there as soon as I'm done with this video and try to catch some wave action out there as well. Then maybe go see how far up into the passes I can catch some snow. Taking a look at the strong winds, you can see we've got high wind warnings still in effect for the coastal areas. The wind advisory still ongoing for some of the Puget Sound here through this morning as well. We've got big winds going, especially across the higher terrain as this turns westerly. I mean, just absolutely ripping across some of the Cascades, probably in excess of 60 miles per hour with the blizzard conditions. You can see the big snowfall falling. It's going to go all the way on in through tomorrow morning. Huge amounts through the entire storm totals here. Look at Crater Lake, 3 to 4 feet. Just humongous amounts. Hopefully nobody has to be out and about traveling across the higher terrain today or tomorrow. And this is off into eastern Oregon as well. Pendleton, you can see the blizzard warning, major risk, 4 out of 5. Big wind gusts here and those blizzard conditions for any portions of the higher terrain of eastern Oregon. And this is all the way through the Idaho Panhandle, Montana, no exception out there. Big winds, blizzard conditions, probably at times as well, even though they don't officially have blizzard warnings out there right now. And very cold Arctic air moving down as we go through Thursday night on in through the weekend upcoming. And also watch out for these snow squalls. If you're traveling, especially eastbound, I mean, these just can bring complete whiteout conditions very quickly out there. And there's also I think there's an app out there. If a snow squall warning, you can actually see that app or the warning come across to you. And, slow down, don't slam on your brakes, turn on your low beams there, and, just try not to stop in the middle of the road. You guys have all seen those horrible videos of what happens when people start stopping in the middle of the interstate, when those snow squalls come across, or that you run into that dense fog and you start slamming into each other. Anyway, you guys know the drill there. Now, let's take a look at what is to come. Here's our storm system currently, and again, with the massive precipitation amounts across the mountains here, some lower elevation rainfall going on as well, and they're talking about some increased landslide potential across BC, Washington, and Oregon also, but we're not going to dive into that detail too much here today. We got a lot to talk about, so I want to kind of focus on the upcoming systems here. But here goes our system. If I put this into motion, this is last night's European run, by the way. You can see that snowfall continuing. Bit of an enhancement to this flow here and some of the wind here across Oregon as we go through tomorrow morning, and to keep that snow going through tomorrow. And you can see that Arctic high sagging south. And as we go through both tomorrow morning, the snow levels are going to be quite low, even west of the Cascades. There's bound to be some surprise snowfall accumulation, some small hail accumulation on the road, and you're going to have this very tight gradient just to the north. And you can see by the time we get into Thursday morning, Thursday late morning and afternoon, we're going to have some convergent zone activity here as it starts to seep through and probably bring that snow level down towards the surface here for some of southwest BC and northwest Washington, as that very cold Arctic air starts to make its way into places like western Washington Washington. How far will it get into Oregon? We'll look at that detail here in a moment, but southwest BC is going to get very cold. And then you can see what's going on out here. We got this Kona low bringing some subtropical moisture here, and this is going to bring a system somewhere into the Pacific Northwest. So confidence is increasing rapidly on quite a dynamic snow scenario unfolding for places west of the Cascades. And you can see on last night's run, it brings this very moist system into Oregon mainly and some of southwest Washington. This would be Friday night, but look at this low pressure center here. We got to watch that one closely because models are still kind of all over the place with where this is going to make landfall. And then this throws an additional round of moisture here into northwest Oregon and southwest Washington. And when these lows come in into an Arctic air mass, it generally spreads precipitation farther north than what the models show. So this would kind of have Seattle under the gun here as well. And I'll show you some of the other models here in a moment. But as this low pressure center comes in here, there's going to be very cold air east of the mountains too. So we could have some strong east winds coming through here, some blizzard conditions through the gorge, the Washington-Oregon border as well, and some strong offshore winds occurring with this low moving down across Oregon there. Now, taking a look at the European last night versus the GFS. So I want to show you the differences we're dealing with here. Here goes our storm system moving through, and then we bring that Arctic high down both on the GFS and the European. And again, mainly, the snowfall amounts aren't going to be huge with this, but they could still be quite impactful as we go through Thursday night, especially across southwest BC where it's pretty chilly here. And we're going to have this Arctic air spilling out as we go on in through Thursday night into Friday morning. Then you can see the GFS further north with that moisture. That would really have Seattle under the gun here, and it would bring snowfall further north across western Washington, possibly back into southwest British Columbia. So you can see the model differences we're dealing with, and this would be a high impact event here, folks. This would be virtually all snow for many areas, maybe some rain down towards the southern Willamette Valley here, but across western Washington, look at that low pressure center. That would be quite a dynamic storm here as we're going on in through the day Saturday. That would throw snow back all the way across southwest BC. Different solution versus the European. Now, taking one quick look here at what's going on today, you can still see, as I'm scrolling through the morning hours, you can still see some big winds here across some of the central and southern Puget Sound, and the westerlies are yet to come down the Strait of Juan de Fuca here and across the higher terrain. Still some very intense wind gusts going to be going on in through the day today, and you can see some of that activity across the east slopes of the Cascades of Washington and Oregon as well as we scroll all the way in through this afternoon. And then we calm the winds down a bit here, but we're still going to have some strong offshore winds and potentially some gap winds, as I mentioned. More on that here in a moment. Looking at Whidbey Island, you can see this is what's going to be going on today. You can see the ensemble mean is right up towards 60 miles per hour. Some gusts up towards the mid-60s would not surprise me out there. And then we turn that flow northeasterly here as we go through Thursday night, and that's the Fraser River outflow. Taking a look at my house last night, look at 49 miles per hour at 5:43 this morning. The ultrasonic collected 46, and those winds could still be going on as we go through the early afternoon today. And taking a look at Vancouver Island, you see the big wind gusts associated here, continuing on through the day today. And this goes down across Washington, down into Oregon. You can see the big wind gusts up over 60 miles per hour. SeaTac probably checking in somewhere around 48, I believe. If we look at SeaTac Airport there, yeah, it looks like they had 48 miles per hour, but that's still could be exceeded as we go through the day today. And just a heads up here, this kind of gives you a nice visual diagram of the winter storm impacts here as we go through today and tomorrow. And you can see the Cascades equals do not try to travel unless you absolutely have to, and make sure the passes are open before you even try. Now, looking at the North American model here, the high resolution, you'll see the snowfall just piling up across the Cascades of Washington, Oregon, and you'll see this system moving through late tonight. Look at that. It could drop some lower snow levels down the I-5 corridor towards the Portland Metro on the north side of that low as it moves through here. You could get up to a couple inches. It'll be wet snowfall out there, but it could be enhancing some of that and bringing that snow pretty close to the surface out there for a time. And then as we go into Wednesday morning, very cold air behind this front. You see some of these lower snow levels across some of the southern sound as well. And then as we go on in towards Thursday, you'll see this start to creep up around southwest BC here as we start to sag that Arctic air mass across the area. This only goes to Thursday afternoon, but you can see some of the snow flying across the northwest interior also. Now, take a look at the European last night versus itself. As of yesterday afternoon, this is the polar lobe here that we've been watching for the last few days. Here goes our windstorm through the area, and we've been watching with bated breath to see how much cold air this is going to drop off. It doesn't get too much out over the water here at 500 millibars, so that's why it's not developing a big snowstorm with it as it arrives, but it's going to drop off some colder air at the lower levels that are going to infiltrate west of the mountains here. And you can see pretty good model agreement now, and we're pretty locked in with that cold air getting out at least into western Washington and potentially down into Oregon as well, and especially east of the Cascades, Idaho and Montana, British Columbia. You're going to be locked in the icebox for a few days here as that system moves across. And then the big story maker here is this storm system there. Now, I talked about this, the European just missing Seattle with a lot of that precipitation, but you can see it actually trended maybe a little bit further north on last night's run. So, and the GFS is definitely further north with this system here. So we have a lot to work out here over the next few days. Very high impact storm would be arriving on the day Friday. Now, this is looking at 925 millibars. I want to show you a little of what's going on here at the upper levels of the atmosphere. So there goes our windstorm here, and then we dive that little weak system here that could bring the lower snow levels we go through tonight. And then we start to turn our eyes to the outflow here, the Arctic air, and you'll see this start to move down. Here we go. Later on the day, Thursday afternoon, it starts to come through the Fraser River Gap. And you can see at 925 millibars, you're dealing with the terrain here. So at 2,500 feet, this cold air wants to come out over the ocean here, but it's dealing with the terrain. So it's pushing through it. It's seeping and ebbing and just kind of weakly coming through in a lot of areas. I shouldn't say weakly because it is going to be roaring pretty good down the Fraser River Gap, but it's not a full-on Arctic outbreak, but it is going to bring enough cold air into the region here to set the stage for some dynamic weather this weekend. But anyway, you can kind of see it seeping through the terrain there at about 2,500 feet. If we look at 5,000 feet, there goes our windstorm here. Then we turn things offshore. You'll see the Fraser River Gap winds go right about there. Again, as we go on in through Thursday night, and you can kind of see it has to interact with the terrain, trying to push through the terrain, but it does make its way out here. But it doesn't flow out enough to really develop a big-time cyclogenesis with the Arctic air's arrival that would bring us a big snowstorm on Thursday night into Friday morning. Now, if we look at 500 millibars, and this really highlights the problem here with this Arctic air. As we go on in through Thursday, you can see how none of this is flowing out over the warmer waters here to develop that cyclogenesis. So it kind of gives you a good idea there at 500 millibars what's going on. The polar lobe hangs back, but it is close enough to drop off Arctic air west of the mountains. Now, taking a look at 850 millibars, 5,000 feet, this is the temperature anomaly, and you'll see the winds with this as well, but you'll see as we go through tonight into tomorrow morning, that cold air really sagging south across the region, and you can see it leak out and come through the gaps there and just kind of sag across Washington and really down into eastern Oregon and Washington as well. Yeah, again, there's going to be a big cutoff here across some of southern, eastern Oregon and northern also. And this could set the stage for some strong easterly winds, as I mentioned, through the gorge there. But you can see pretty good agreement that the very cold air is going to get out west of the mountains here. Now, take a look at the European. This is last night's run, 2-meter temperature. I want to scroll through here, and we'll take a look, and you'll see that air start to sag south here as we go through the day Thursday. Here we go, and you can really see it roaring in here. And then as we go through Thursday evening, you see Seattle's dew points dropping. Look at Southwest BC is going to be in the icebox by the time we go towards Friday morning. Look at these dew points just dropping down towards 21 for Seattle. You can see warmer air still around for Portland here, but watch what happens here as we go. Now we're going through Friday afternoon, and you can kind of see the cold air is in place. Now, more on that here in a moment. You can see the European, again, yesterday afternoon. This is dew point. We're going to scroll ahead here, and that's a big characteristic of Arctic air, the dew point temperature, and this is going to sag south across the area. And as we go on in towards Thursday, check out some of these dew point temperatures. You can see that very dry air sag down towards southwest Washington, and just kind of the cutoff is right there across northwest Washington, southwest Washington, northwest Oregon, and the very dry air gets down into eastern Washington as well. Now, taking a look at the NAM 12 km, let's see what the North American model has to say. You'll see this very cold air sag again, and it does encompass Seattle. And again, the big cutoff is right there, somewhere right across the Portland metro. But did you see that as you start to go into Friday? Some of that cuts into back into the Portland the metro area there. You can see some of the east winds would be trying to get out with the arrival of this next system, potentially pulling some east winds and bringing that colder air out for the Portland metro as well. And look at the interior of British Columbia, just locked in that Arctic air. Now, let's take a look at the GFS here, because this is hot off the presses. 2-meter dew point, and again, we're looking for the characteristics of that Arctic air. Let's watch that sag south as we go through the day Thursday. The GFS has been the warmer of the solutions, but still very cold across British Columbia, and it gets that Arctic air all the way down to right around Olympia, maybe a little bit further south there, and you can kind of see it hanging out, some of that cold air working out towards southwest Washington, and then here comes the next system. And look at the dew points, plenty cold enough to start a snow here for Seattle, and this could potentially be trying to pull some of that wind out of the east there back into the Portland metro here. So we have to watch scenarios like that very closely. But the GFS would bring a very heavy snowfall across much of western Washington and into southwest BC here with this setup. You can clearly see that warm tongue. Look at this battle, this clash of Arctic air mass versus warm Pacific air mass somewhere right across southwest Washington and northwest Oregon. Very intense system rolling in here on Friday and Saturday. Now the GFS on the left versus the North American model on the right. Let's take a look at the precipitation map. There goes the system tonight. And we sag that cold air, and you can kind of see some of these convergence zones trying to form on the GFS and showing it on the NAM here as well. And then here comes our next system. You can see the North American model a little bit further south as we go. And this is hot off the presses, but that's as far as the NAM goes. And this would probably start to include Seattle here. So the North American model and the GFS are a little bit further north, it looks like, than what the European is showing. And you can see this would be a very high impact event here on the GFS with cold Arctic air in place. Now taking a look at the European, let's look at the latest last night's run as well. And you can see again as we go through Thursday some of the convergence zone activity with the Arctic air's arrival. But you can see this a fairly robust low pressure system moving here, just kind of being a Seattle south at this point. But again, with very cold Arctic air mass in place, it's likely that this precipitation would spread further north. Now, let's take a look at the mountain areas. Crystal Mountain, no surprise here. Big snowfalls in a 24-hour period, approaching 2 feet. Whistler, big amounts as well. Mount Baker, you guys get the idea. Stevens Pass up over 20 inches in a 24-hour period. And looking at the GFS versus the Canadian model, I want to show you something as well, because the Canadian model is definitely colder than the GFS. So you can kind of see how that polar lobe takes a closer swing at the Pacific Northwest. And then as we scroll off into the future, also as a product of being colder here and that Arctic air mass being further south, the Canadian wants to bring that into Oregon versus the GFS further north. So we still have some pretty good model discrepancy on how this is going to unfold here as we go through the week upcoming. Look at the national blend of models, total snow. So this is the first time we're actually really looking at a snow total map, and we're going to look at western Washington, southwest BC, and Oregon here. So you can just see the huge amounts piling up. Here goes tonight's storm across some of southwest Washington, maybe even some snowflakes down towards the Portland metro as that rolls through. And then we go on into Wednesday morning, probably going to be some lower snow levels around as well, some small hail still going on with some of that shower activity. And then we go on into Thursday afternoon, the arrival of that Arctic air, it starts to pile up here a bit. And then Friday night, that Pacific system starts to launch in here. And look at some of these snowfall totals showing up for Seattle. 6 up towards 7 inches here, southwest BC potentially, all the way down towards the Portland metro. But you see the sharp cutoff somewhere here across northwest Oregon as well. And again, we have to watch for that cold air being pulled through the gorge there also. So yeah, impressive stuff. Somebody is probably going to get hit with a significant winter storm as we go through later this week, on and through this weekend, somewhere from southwest BC across western Washington and across northwest Oregon. It goes without saying there's going to be big snowfall, probably some portions of eastern Washington as well. And the kind of the limitations out there more is the moisture. But look at these totals across the mountainous areas. I mean, you're talking about measuring things in the feet across the Washington and Oregon Cascades. I wanted to show you this as well, the national blend of models, 10-meter wind speed. I want to show you that timing on the Arctic front here. So we're waiting to see that Fraser River outflow. You can see it's not going yet. And we go on into towards Thursday, and there it goes. You can see it seeping out here and pushing a modified Arctic front down the Puget Sound. Now it's moving across southwest Washington, flowing out over the coastline here. And then what we're going to be looking for here is this system. You can see the east winds here blowing as a Pacific storm comes in here, kind of the warm front setting up right here, again, right right across northwest Oregon as that moves in here and creating our winter storm here across the Pacific Northwest. And this is looking at Friday Harbor. I just wanted to show you here the northeast winds coming out of the Fraser River Gap here as we go on in through Friday morning, picking up pretty good. Some of the models showing above 40 miles per hour, some of them even above 50. And this is looking at what's coming today. And let's look at the HRR, the high resolution rapid refresh, as we go. You can see as we go through the early afternoon is when the strongest winds are going to be here for some of Whidbey Island. And as we go through the later morning hours, you can see some of Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia still gusting quite strongly. And again, as we go through this afternoon, the winds are just going to be absolutely howling across the higher terrain of the Cascades also. So again, do not travel. But anyway, I've got to wrap things up here, and I am going to go up there and try to catch some of those big waves and the strong winds across Whidbey Island. So wish me luck there. If it looks good up there and if I can set things up, I may do a live stream as well. But we'll do this all again tomorrow. It's a good thing we have a few days to, kind of break down what is coming this weekend, because we have high impact stuff potentially rolling into the Pacific Northwest here. So anyway, cross your fingers, snow lovers, or you know what to do if you don't like snow. There's always that subset of people that just absolutely hate the snowfall here in the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, what a beautiful storm on the infrared satellite imagery. It was very fun watching this thing just completely bomb out off the coastline here and develop. And you can clearly see it still has its structure, even though it's across some of the interior areas here of southern British Columbia. But anyway, hope you guys are liking these videos. Click like and subscribe. We will do this again maybe tonight. If I get back early enough tonight, I may do another video or something, and we'll check the most recent model runs. Otherwise, if not, I will talk to you guys tomorrow morning, and I'll see you then.